Okay, we are ready to start.
Ready? Good evening. I'd like to call the order of the meeting of the Anaheim Public Utilities Board. Can we have a verbal roll call, please?
Yes. Board Member Baroldi. Board Member Bala. Board Member Guyona.
Present.
Board Member Campos Kurtz. Here. Vice Chair Seymour.
Here.
Let the record show that Board Member Abdul Rahman is absent right now, and we have a quorum.
And I'm here too.
I'm sorry. Chair Madrano,
Present.
let the record show that we have a quorum.
Thank you. This time, we'll open for public comments. Members of the public can submit comments electronically for board consideration, or members of the public can provide in-person comments of any item on the jurisdiction of the board, or provide public comments on any agenda item. When recognized by the chairperson, please state your name and address for the record. The time limit established by the board for speakers is 3 minutes per speaker. We have any public comment present here? Seeing none, do we have any electronic? Written comment?
No.
No electronic comments submitted. Thank you. We will close public comments. And then we'll go to move item number 2, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my honor and privilege today to recognize you, our chairperson, Ernesto Madrano, for your years of service on the Public Utilities Board. It's been a great opportunity to work with you, to learn from you, and just wanted to share just a few of my thoughts. I've really come to appreciate that you care about the agency, making sure that the agency is healthy, which means infrastructure is working. That means the processes that we have in place are working, that our financial systems are working. We also have a care for our community, and that means people who are struggling to pay their bills, whatever their situation is, you want us to make sure, in fact, you demand that we do our best to take care of our customers. And I appreciate the high standard that you set for the organization. And lastly, you care about our employees. There's been many occasions where we've had discussions about how our employees are doing, whether it's through the pandemic or recognizing them for volunteering at different events, participating in the pods where vaccinations were taking place. And so I just really appreciate the guidance that you've given to this agency and commend you for your years of service, and wanted to say that I will personally and professionally miss working with you, but I wish you all the very best in your future endeavors, and I wanted to recognize you with a couple of things. And if I could have you join us here, Mr. Chair. The first is a plaque with a gavel that you can keep with you forever, and hopefully not have to use it, as well as a proclamation signed by our staff that recognizes your years of service on the Public Utilities Board as our chairperson. It's something that, we're joined here by our Mayor Pro Tem, and he also served as chairperson of the Public Utilities Board. So something that's very prestigious in this community. I wanted to congratulate you and give you an opportunity to say a few words.
Sure. It's kind of moving, touching to be here at this moment. I never thought a day that this would happen. I'm leaving because I no longer an Anaheim resident, so I'm not eligible to serve on the board. I've had some big footsteps to follow in. My council member, Steve Fessel, and was gracious enough to appoint me and reappoint me, and I want to thank you for that. I want to thank each and every one of my colleagues on the board. We learned a lot. We were able to go through a lot of challenges here with hearings and making difficult, challenging decisions for the residents, always keeping the residents in mind, always keeping the rates in an affordable manner, always keeping the services in a good manner, and also taking care of those residents that are less fortunate. And I think that's what this agency prides itself. The staff, I mean, when I first came on, I think Mr. Billner would look at me and just like shake his head, because the information you learn here, you want to learn anything about, there is an energy utility. or any governing body, any board, any commission, this is the place to learn. Apolitical, completely technical, and it just, we have the best talent, the best staff. I mean, I'm really proud of working with each and every one of you. Your level of professionalism, your knowledge, your expertise, all dedicated to the residents of Anaheim. And I working close with Duku, Allison, Mike, I mean, taking the trips. You think it's easy when you open up the faucet, water comes out, magic. When you flip the switch up and your lights go on or off, or your air conditioning goes on and off, magic. Well, it's not magic. And the field trip we took up to, out to Hoover Dam and down following the water project from the Wetland Intake Center, going all the way up to Oroville Dam and following the water all the way as it comes into the treatment center in Sylmar. Just an eye opener. And I would hope that folks will be more willing to participate in those, as I call them, the field trips that the Metropolitan Water District hosts through Councilmember Steve Fessel. It's a really eye opener, and I would hope that you would want to be able to participate and take those, as I say, field trips. For the newer board members, I highly encourage you to participate or learn, take the tours, take the trips, because that's the only way you're going to really put your arms around it and really learn about what we have, the power plants, the treatment center, everything, the customer service and the community activities that take place. So again, I can't thank you enough. This is a pretty moving moment for me, and thank you.
All right. We'd really like it if our board members could come up and take a photo with Ernesto. And then following that, I'm going to ask our Council Mayor Pro Tem and then our staff as well. So let's start with our board members first.
We'll definitely know what year this photograph is.
I'm smiling, okay?
One more. Okay.
And then Steve. Well done. Yes. You made me proud.
One more.
Okay, can I get one with this side?
Just okay, everybody smile. You know, they can't tell.
One more. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
All right, congratulations. And Mr. Chair, before we continue with the meeting, I wanted to recognize that our Mayor Pro Tem, Steve Fessel, will be joining us from 5 till about 6 o'clock, and then he has to go to yet another meeting for another board that he is on. But we're very just pleased to have him join us. He's very familiar with the utility, of course, being a former chairperson of the Utilities Board and now on City Council. We're just very pleased to have him here as part of, to join us here.
Would you join us in giving your words of wisdom? Anything to share with us, Mayor Pro Tem?
Just a moment. Push the button. I'm very honored and flattered. I wanted to be here to express my best wishes and thanks, sincere thanks to Ernesto for the great work that he's done over the last few years. It's no secret to anybody in this room that public utilities is pretty near and dear to me. And I always enjoy at least one visit a year, and I wasn't able to last year due to circumstances. So I'm very honored to have been invited this year. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Next item on the agenda, approval of the minutes, the April 28th meeting. I understand that everyone had a chance to review the minutes, and if so, according to the motion to approve the minutes.
This is
John Seymour. I have reviewed those minutes and I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Vice Chair Seymour. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Member Campos Kurtz. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
This is a roll call vote for item number 3. Vice Chair Seymour,
Aye.
Board Member Baraldi, Board Member Bala,
Aye.
Board Member Guyona,
Aye.
Board Member Campos Kurtz,
Aye.
Chair Madrano.
Aye.
The vote is 5 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent, not present. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the presentation. Update on imported water supply.
Yes, Mr. Moore will be presenting this item.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the board. This is an update on our imported water supply. And I'm joined today by 2 members from the Metropolitan Water District, Dimitri Polisos and James Bodner, who are online, and they'll be co-presenting this with me. In no time has imported water been as important to Anaheim as it is right now for many reasons. And this presentation was brought to us at the request of Chairman Madrano. And it's not always that we've always, or it hasn't been always that Anaheim has had imported water to rely on like it does today. Go to the next slide. And here, 2 pictures of Anaheim from a long time ago, Harbor Boulevard in 1890 and Harbor Boulevard in 1965. And you see some vast differences between those 2 photos. But one of the big differences that the cause between those 2, the differences of those 2 photos is imported water that was brought into Anaheim. When Anaheim Light and Water started delivering water to its customers in the 1880s, its only source of water was the Santa Ana River that brought water to the city. And as the population of the city quickly outgrew that local water supply, Anaheim and other Southern California agencies came together to form the Metropolitan Water District in 1928, which our representative today is Director Steve Fessel, is here with us today. And their first project was to bring imported water from the Colorado River to Southern California, which they did when it first started coming to us in 1941. And as Anaheim and Southern California continued to grow during that time period, they added a second imported water source, the State Water Project from Northern California. So you go to the next slide. So our water supply today here in Anaheim, like many other Southern California agencies, comes from a combination of local supply or groundwater and imported water, which comes from 2 different sources. Next slide. And so about 3/4 of our water normally in a typical year comes from the local groundwater supply. And about 1/4 of it comes from imported water, both the State Water Project and the Colorado River Aqueduct. And a small portion of it is recycled water that we have here from our plant across the street. Next slide. However, the local groundwater is not always available to us, even though it is our cheapest source of water due to dry conditions and other issues. For the past year, PFAS has been detected in our groundwater, and most of our wells are now offline. So we are now relying more on imported water. As you can see here, 3/4 of our water this year is now imported water. And this flexibility and diversification in our water supply sources provides Anaheim a tremendous benefit of reliability by having this imported water whenever we need it. Next slide. So Southern California has a similar story of being able to rely on that imported water. In a normal year, Southern California has an imported water demand, and this is in addition to their local supplies, of around 2 million acre feet. So we're going to use that abbreviation MAF for million acre feet. You'll see that throughout the presentation. And that comes from a combination on typical years, about 1 million from Northern California through the State Water Project, and 1 million from the Colorado River. These are what it typically happens. However, next slide. But as imported water changes, especially in Northern California, due to issues with the Delta and dry conditions, that water from Northern California isn't always there. So with that, Metropolitan Water District in some years looks to purchase additional water on a short-term basis. And so our presentation that Dimitri Polisos will be going through today will talk to you about why and how they decide to purchase water primarily in Northern California in years like this. So go ahead, Dimitri.
Great, thank you, Michael, and a pleasure to be here with you all this evening. So as Michael said, we have 2 imported water supply sources. So what I wanted to do first is really focus in on how we do our planning. So we go into every year planning for both dry conditions and wet conditions, so drought conditions and surplus conditions, because we know that how the year starts may not necessarily be how the year ends. So we've seen in the past many times dry start can end up wet and vice versa. Well, unfortunately for this year, we not only started off dry, but all things are pointing towards a very dry end to the year as well. So what I wanted to do first here is talk about the water supply situation or conditions in each of the imported water supply sources. So we'll start with our supplies from the Colorado River. The watershed associated with that is the Upper Colorado River Basin. And the things that we typically look at to give us an indication of the health of the basins or the watersheds are both the amount of precipitation that falls and the amount of runoff that's projected. The graphic here on the left shows you that the peak snowpack was 88% of normal for the Upper Colorado River Basin, so slightly below normal. But what's very striking here is the projected runoff for this water year is much further below normal than that, at 34%. And so that's really indicative of how dry conditions have been. Basically, they're projecting that of the snow melt that that will come out of that snowpack, not much of it is going to end up in the reservoirs because of the warm conditions, the dry conditions of the soils. And so the graphic on the right shows you kind of historic runoff for that system. And really only 3 years in the past 11 or so years have been above average. The rest have been below average. And in fact, the current projection for 2021, the bar graph to the far right here, it is going to be, or it's projected to be, the lowest in this time frame. So the lowest we've seen in the last decade or so. And the same is really the case on the State Water Project. So we'll focus here. The State Water Project supplies are generated here in the Northern Sierra Nevada. And again, below normal snowpack, 72% of normal. And again, we're seeing the same thing we saw in the Colorado River system. The runoff is expected to be much further below normal at 38%. We have seen this situation on the Colorado River system. It's quite rare to see this on the State Water Project. This is one of the first times we've seen that disparity. But last year was also dry for Northern California, so these cumulative effects are really showing. And the graphic on the right here, again, showing runoff, only same with the Upper Colorado River Basin, only 3 years of the last 11 or so years are above average. And similar with the Colorado River system, the projected runoff for this year on this system is projected to be the lowest it's been in this time frame. So when we look at our, so those are the conditions that we're experiencing this year. Now our supplies on the Colorado River side, despite how dry things are, the agreements that are in place and the way that is operated, we expect to not see any cuts on that system. Very different for the State Water Project system. On that system, we are allocated year by year. So basically how the hydrologic conditions develop will dictate how much water we get. And right now for this year, we're looking at a 5% allocation. That's the lowest we've ever seen. We've seen it only happen once before, somewhat recently, back in 2014. But this is the lowest we've ever seen, or that's the lowest that we've experienced. And that translates for Metropolitan. I'll give you an idea of what the volumes of water we're talking about here as I stack up our supplies. On the Colorado, about 1 million acre feet, just as Michael indicated earlier. Again, no cutbacks on this system anticipated for this year, regardless of how dry things are. But on the State Water Project, a mere 5% allocation, our 100% allocation, our full allocation on that system is roughly just under 2 million acre feet. So a 5% translates to 0.096 or so million acre feet. On top of that, we are securing water purchases of about 0.032 million acre feet. We'll get into the details of that a little bit later. But all of this adds up to a supply of just over 1 million acre feet, 1.14 million acre feet of supply. Now, our projected demand for the year is at 1.7 million acre feet. So now we have a disparity. We have a supply gap of roughly 500,000 acre feet. So the question is, how do we fill this gap? Well, to that, we turn to our storage. This graphic here gives you a sense of how our storage has developed and how we've used storage for the past several years. This goes all the way back to 2000. So these are looking at end of year storage balances. The green bar represents what we categorize as dry year storage. The orange bar indicates emergency storage. And by that, we mean catastrophic events, such as an earthquake that would sever our imported supply conveyance system. So that would cut us off from our supplies. As you can see, we fluctuated up and down, and it really follows how the droughts have hit the state, or have hit us here in Southern California. But on the far right, you'll see for 2020, how we ended that year with 3.2 million acre feet of dry year storage. And if you look, that is the most we've had in our entire history in our storage portfolio. So that includes water that is in the ground, our storage programs that are groundwater programs, our surface water, and these are the programs that are within our region, our service area, and also outside of our service area. So this is everything. So we entered this year, 2021, with a very healthy storage volume. And so the 500,000 acre foot of supply gap will be easily managed with this storage. So you might be asking, so why are we purchasing water? So for that, we need to dig a little bit more into the details. We need to look at where that storage is and where the demand for that storage is. So this graphic here, the blue dots and the region, which is the shaded, kind of the gray shaded area, that indicates where our storage programs are. So they're diverse in many ways. Diverse, again, groundwater, surface water, and diverse in geography as well. We have water stored in Lake Mead in Nevada. We have water stored up and down the state. But I want to focus in on the State Water Project facilities or programs. So part of our service area can only be serviced by water that comes through the State Water Project. And these are the facilities, these are the programs that can help in meeting the demands for those portions of our service area, again, that can only be served by State Water Project supplies or supplies conveyed through the State Water Project system. And so the graphic that popped up here is showing the end of year balances of those storage facilities. And we'll zoom in here where we are in 2021. So we're looking at available or storage in those reservoirs and those groundwater programs at about 0.7 million acre feet. You might be asking yourself, well, that's a lot of water. And it is. However, we need to dig a little deeper here and look at the details of the mix, the split between groundwater and surface water. And what you see here, the majority of this water is groundwater. And the challenges with groundwater, aside from water quality issues and the like, is that it has a small straw, meaning it takes time to move that water out of those programs. You have to, in many cases, pump that water out, and there are capacity limitations and what have you. As opposed to our surface water, which is represented here by the smaller amount, but there's a bigger straw for that water. And so that's water that we can easily get to when we need it as we go through a year. So the purpose or the reason for purchasing water is not necessarily to get us through this year, but it's really to help bolster those surface water supplies for next year. I can't tell you where the State Water Project allocation is going to end up next year, but I can tell you the initial State Water Project allocation, we're going to start next year with a very low allocation. So the more water we have at the ready to use to service those areas in our service area that can only receive water from the State Water Project, the more surface water we have, the more reliable we will be. So it's really keeping an eye out for what's going to happen potentially next year. All right, so with that background as to what led us to the decision to purchase water, let's talk a little bit about the water that we purchase. There's three basic types of ways that we can generate this type of water. The first is reservoir reoperation, and this is the simplest and most direct form or way. The surface water in a reservoir is essentially released, and then that water is transferred to a buyer. The second type is groundwater substitution, and this occurs when a farmer uses groundwater instead of their surface water supplies. So the surface water that they would have used is then available to be transferred to the buyer. And then the third is crop idling or temporary fallowing. This is where a farmer voluntarily chooses not to plant a crop, and that the surface water that would have been used on those crops is then available and transferred to the buyer. So those are the three types of transfer supply types or purchase water types. So let's talk a little bit about when that water is developed and how it gets moved through the State Water Project system. So the water is typically developed between the months of May through September. The rub here is that water in the May and June timeframe cannot be moved through the Delta, and these are based on environmental requirements and regulations. So that water can't move. It's developed, it's produced, but it can't be moved. So what we do is we store it in the State Water Project Reservoir, Oroville, up in Northern California, in that time frame. And then when capacity opens up in the summer months, when water is allowed to move through the system, through the Delta, that water is then conveyed through and pumped or exported out at Banks Pumping Plant. There is a losses associated with this water. You can think of it as a toll, like going through a bridge toll. Any of this water that is moved is tagged with a percentage of loss, and it's typically 20%. It can go as high as 35%. That's what kind of the range that we're looking at. So for example, for every 100 acre feet of water that you move through the system, you need to leave behind 20 acre feet of that, if you're assuming a 20% loss. Once you get the water through the Delta, it is then conveyed through the California Aqueduct and then delivered to the buyer, and in this case, in this example, Metropolitan. So you can see here, we are leveraging the infrastructure that has been built and the infrastructure that Metropolitan has been paying into to be able to not only store the water until it can move, but then also then move the water to us from Northern California. So there are two types or two north of Delta water supplies that Metropolitan is actively seeking or pursuing this year. The first is through the State Water Contractors Incorporated. This is a group of folks, a small agency up north that represents all or most of the State Water Project contractors. And they developed a buyers group. The State Water Contractors Incorporated negotiates for this water. And what was negotiated, and this is done on an annual basis, and what was negotiated for this year was $625 for each per acre foot. And so just to give you some context, and this is market based. So the last time Metropolitan was in this purchased water and was in this buyers group was, I believe, back in 2015. At that time, if I'm not mistaken, the cost was about $700 per acre foot. So it will fluctuate depending on the conditions of any given year. Just to put this in perspective, keep in mind, this is the water cost for the supply. This is the cost for the water supply. Let's contrast that or look at our supplies from the State Water Project. Our allocation is 5% this year, but regardless if the allocation was 50%, 100%, there is no actual cost for the water supply. Where the cost comes in is moving that water to Southern California. So it's the power costs that are associated. And that's roughly $200, $250 per acre foot. So when you look at the costs that are on this slide, you need to factor in that on top of that, additional cost to the 625 would be the cost to move the water, the $200 to $250 per acre foot. So the second supply that we are involved with this year is the Yuba Accord water. So we're part of that group, and that receives water from the Yuba County Water Agency. And on that system, these are pre-negotiated. They do it every 5 years, and they do it by water year type. So the drier the year, the more expensive. And that's what that range, $358 to $447 represents. As the year as the year is designated as being more dry, you end up at the higher end of this range. And again, this was pre-negotiated back in a couple years back. And I think this range is in place till 2025. At any rate, keep in mind again that this cost is the cost of the water supply. You need to add additional cost to move the water to Southern California. There's different components to the Yuba County water, the Yuba Accord water. There's the groundwater substitution piece. Unfortunately, this year, that groundwater substitution is not available. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about, because it's been in the press recently or a few months ago, and there's a lot more discussion about it, and it's this new water index that has come out. And I'll be honest with you all, we're at Metropolitan, we're still learning about this, but I'll share with you what I know. So this is relatively new, and it tries to track the spot price of water rights in California. So this index tracks the price of surface water and the sales in 4 adjudicated groundwater basins. 3 of those 4 groundwater basins are actually in Metropolitan's service area. Those 3 are the Central Basin, Chino Basin, and Main San Gabriel Basin. So the index, though, does not account for what we can tell, does not account for the additional cost to move the water, or the cost to utilize the facilities to move the water, or the limitations involved or surrounding the distribution system that moves the water around. So those are things that we just wanted to bring up, that it just, at least that this part of the evolution of this water index, it's not necessarily it comports with the reality of how we see the market. So anyway, Metropolitan is following this index, but it does not currently plan to purchase any water, any of the futures at this time. So Metropolitan, to sum things up, has a diversified strategy. Metropolitan has 2 core water supplies, as mentioned, the Colorado River Supply and the State Water Project Supply. We've also developed surface water storage in Diamond Valley Lake, our biggest and our largest and most recent reservoir. We've implemented demand management programs. This includes our efforts to conserve water in the region and our support of the development of local resources projects. In addition, Metropolitan develops water supply programs. These programs include our groundwater storage programs that allow Metropolitan to store surplus surface water in groundwater basins. And these programs also include our Palo Verde Irrigation District fallowing program. So just to sum up here, Metropolitan's diversified strategy has positioned us well to purchase water supplies strategically to manage risk. So in essence, Metropolitan isn't desperate for water this year, but we are already focused and planning for next year. And so with that, that brings us to the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Dimitri.
And so you can see there's a lot of benefit to Anaheim and our customers here to be part of this larger coalition so that we actually can drive the market as part of the imported water market instead of relying on markets and futures to set the price. So it's a great benefit to us, especially in years like this where we rely heavily on imported water. With that, I'll ask if there's any questions.
Any questions from members of the board? Vice Chair Seymour.
Yes, I had not heard of the NASDAQ California Water Index before. Who is behind this and what is their purpose? What are they trying to accomplish?
James or Dimitri, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. I mean, it is an index, first and foremost, that's just tracking the spot market price for water. So that's just one element. So one way that you can look at it is somewhat like a barometer of what the price of water for surface water supplies, and then for those groundwater basins, what's the price for water that's happening. So it's just giving the public, information. Now there's a much more complex, and I have to admit that I'm definitely limited in terms of my financial experience on futures, but then there's a futures element where a party could potentially buy a futures contract that is indexed related to that price index. So a person could purchase a contract, and depending on whether that index, the spot price of water, goes up or down, they can cash in on that contract. The difficulty that we have associated with this index is, it's one part is really nice that, it gives you information, which is helpful, but the difficulty is how do you move water? And even if you have a futures contract that provides you a financial benefit, that doesn't necessarily mean that you actually can obtain the water and move the water to the region. I don't know if that directly answered your question. We're still learning more about it.
Is this a private enterprise that's doing this to create like a futures market like corn or whatever it is?
If I could add a little bit,
Go ahead, Jen.
I was gonna say, if I could add a little bit to this, the Central Valley farmers are really behind this. It provides an index for them as they buy and sell water. I understand it's not a physical market, but it does help them to price their product and make decisions on when to fallow fields. And again, my understanding is this is a private enterprise behind it.
Okay, that makes sense to
Yeah.
me. Thank you.
Any other members of the board have questions? Seeing or hearing no questions, thank you. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing, which is item number 5 on the agenda, concerning the adoption of the City of Anaheim's 2020 Urban and Water Management Plan and the 2016 Urban and Water Management Plan Amendment. I have opened the public participation portion of this hearing. I would like to explain the procedures that the Public Utility Board will follow in conducting this hearing. First, staff will make an oral presentation with supporting documents regarding the plans, after which the board will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff. Next, we will hear comments from the public, which may be in oral or written format. Each speaker shall have 5 minutes to provide public comment. At the close of all testimony, staff will present closing remarks. After closing remarks, if any, public hearing will be closed. Finally, the board may discuss all evidence presented to it, but may not ask additional questions extended to the public who has testified without reopening the record. Does any board member have questions as to the procedures for the public hearing?
No questions.
Questions? Does staff wish to make a presentation?
Yes. We have with us Philip Bogdanoff. He's our Water Resources and Planning Manager. He'll be providing a brief presentation on the plan and the relevance to us here at the city.
Thank you, Michael. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'd like to present a short presentation on our 2020 Urban Water Management Plan this evening. Now, for agencies, water agencies such as APU, believe it or not, lot of the discussion around the water cooler is related to supply and demand. As a water supplier, it is our job to discuss this. In fact, you know, it's our job to ask questions, right? We need to ask the questions about both supply and demand. And just as importantly, it's our job to be able to answer these questions. And so APU historically has done well in being proactive and taking a look at both short-term and long-term demand and supply projections. Most recently, APU completed an update of its water system master plan in 2018. Now, for some agencies in California, it may not be as proactive. So as a result, in 1983, the water code was updated to require all water suppliers in California to conduct long-term planning for water supply and water demand. And that's where the urban water management comes in. So the urban water management plan is the vehicle for which suppliers conduct this long-term planning for supply and demand. As discussed, it's required by the California Water Code, is to be prepared every 5 years and submitted to the state. Prior to submitting to the state, it is required that the governing body approve that. So here at Anaheim, it's ultimately the city council. It does require a public hearing for which we are here this evening. Now, the urban water management plan does include a number of components to it, but primarily it is a document that does look at supply and demand. And so we'll go ahead and just dive into both demand and supply. So we look at demands. It is important that we look at historical demands and we look at historical demand trends, because that helps inform our projections looking into the future. So if we look back about 20 years, we look at a single family home here in Anaheim with a family of 5, that home used about 220,000 gallons of water in the year 2000, right? That's about 15 average size swimming pools for the year. In the last 20 years, Anaheim Public Utilities has invested in demand management programs. And that includes education, public outreach programs to educate people to use water wisely, to not waste water. That include rebate programs and incentives for low flow toilets, high efficiency washers, even outdoor incentives for turf removal to reduce usage outdoors. Another item that's changed in the last 20 years is that the plumbing code has been updated several times to require more and more efficient fixtures be installed for both new and retrofit construction. So through these updates over the last 20 years, we've seen that same household in the year 2020 used only 140,000 gallons for the year. So through these demand management programs, we've seen demands decrease by over 30%. And we do, looking at these trends, we do expect that these trends and these behaviors will continue through the 25-year planning horizon that we are looking at in the urban water management plan. So taking another look at demands, historic demands is indicated with the red line here from the year 2000 to the year 2020, right? This is depicting the total annual demand here in Anaheim. And we see that same decrease in demands over the last 20 years. And looking to the future, from the year 2020 to the year 2045, we do see a modest increase in demands. We do expect to see an increase in population as well as new housing here in Anaheim. But again, we do expect that these trends to continue and that water efficiency to continue over this 25-year planning horizon. Now, in addition to projecting out what we think the demands are going to be in over the next 25 years, the urban water management plan also requires suppliers to develop a plan on how it would reduce demands if it were called to do so, through what they call a water shortage contingency plan. And if we look back to 2015-16, we can remember that the governor issued a state of emergency for California due to the drought. and required that each supplier reduce its demand. So for APU, that required reduction was 20%. So in response to that, APU exercised its water shortage contingency plan. And essentially that water shortage contingency plan is a set of levers that APU can pull to achieve the desired reduction in demands. And so 2015-16, we did just that. And so instead of voluntary conservation, right, we now made them, they were mandatory measures to prohibit water waste. And ultimately, we did implement a plan that restricted irrigation to only 2 days a week. Through these actions, APU was able to achieve a savings of 22%, which is over 3.3 billion gallons of water. And what's just as important, important about this is that APU was able to do this through public outreach, education, and that we did not have to implement any sort of fines or penalties for our customers. So now that we've looked at demands of where we've been, where we think we're going, and what are the measures we can use to potentially reduce if we were called to do so, we look at water supply. As in the previous presentation that we just saw, Anaheim's water portfolio is made up of local groundwater that's managed by Orange County Water District and supplemented by the groundwater replenishment system, and imported water that comes from the Colorado River and from the State Water Project. And so APU over the years, as was discussed, has worked closely with our partners to ensure that the supply meets the demand here in Anaheim. And looking to the future, Anaheim will continue to work with its partners. We know that on a state level and on a federal level, there's billions of dollars being proposed to modernize the water infrastructure and for drought resiliency. So APU will continue to work with our partners to see how best we can leverage these available funding, these programs, to help benefit the region and APU and its customers. Also, as discussed, when we look at our water supply, we don't look at water supplies one at a time. We really kind of look at the water portfolio. And so we really try to balance our water supply portfolio in looking at reliability, looking at the quantity of supply that's required, and looking at what that cost is. And so as discussed, we look at the State Water Project, for example, and we've heard that over a period of 3 or 4 years, the allocation for Southern California has gone from 85% to 5%, right? That's a difference in water supply of about 1.5 million acre feet of water. So there's plenty of water to be had when it's available, but the reliability of that water source is highly variable. To help mitigate against that, again, it's discussed, Southern California has invested in storage, such as Diamond Valley Lake, to help mitigate those swings in reliability. And finally, there's also water purchase, water transfer, water banking programs, where some of these programs may not be the most cost-effective supply options, but they do serve a purpose in the whole. And again, they help maintain storage levels, and they help mitigate against the variability in reliability. So all of these together kind of make up that balanced water supply to ensure that we have the right amount of water at the right time to meet the demands here in APU. Now looking a little bit closer to home, APU and other Orange County water agencies have invested in the groundwater replenishment system that's managed by Orange County Water District. And this system takes treated wastewater, purifies that, and uses that water to help supplement and recharge the groundwater basin. And what's so important about this investment, this strategic investment for APU and the other producers here in Orange County, is that this project is an example of a water supply that checks all those boxes, right? So it provides us with a quantity of water that's proportional to what we use here. It's very reliable both in dry and wet year conditions and is at a very competitive price. Bottom line is that investing in this type of strategic project gives a very good benefit to our customers at a very good price. And so these are the type of opportunities that we look for when looking to either maintain or supplement our water supply. So as discussed, Urban Water Management Plan does contain a variety of factors that we need to take a look at. Principally, it's supply and demand, for which we talked about. However, there are a few items that we did want to point out to you that are new for 2020. So in 2020, the Department of Water Resources now requires that water suppliers report on their energy intensity. So water suppliers have to report on the amount of energy used to supply water to its customers. Because it's a new item, as a result, DWR issued a last-minute update to their reporting requirements. For that reason, that was a last-minute update. So that's contained in the staff report and will ultimately be incorporated into the final report. The second item is an amendment to our 2015 Urban Water Management Plan. And essentially what this document does is it documents APU's reduced reliance on the Bay Delta. And so this document documents that not only for us, but for Metropolitan and all the member agencies. And why that's important is that it shows that for any protected item or any, such as the Delta Conveyance Project or the tunnel project, the proposed project in the Bay Delta, is that it shows that that project is not going to lead to an increase in reliance on the Delta. It shows that overall we're all decreasing our reliance on the Delta, and that the focus of that project is really to either maintain or improve the reliability of that water source. Back in 2014 and 15, the state really didn't have much guidance to provide water suppliers. And over the last 5 years, there's been a lot of efforts to provide guidance and provide reporting requirements. So for that reason, since that information is now available, APU, along with Metropolitan and most of the member agencies, are including that as an amendment to the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan to ensure that we are in compliance with the 2009 Delta. So through this process, through other studies that Anaheim has done in the past, we've asked the questions, and just as importantly, we've been able to answer these questions related to supply and demand. And through this exercise, we've shown that Anaheim Public Utilities does have sufficient water supply to provide for the demands here in the city over the next 25 years, and that we do not project any water shortages within the 25-year planning horizon. However, it is possible that Anaheim Public Utilities may be called upon to again pull those levers in the future because of a mandated reduction. But based on the analysis, we do not show that there is any actual physical shortage that APU is going to experience over the planning horizon. So to finalize the plan, the Water Code does require a public hearing, for which we're here this evening. It does require City Council consideration, for which we are asking you to recommend here tonight. After approval, that plan will be submitted to the Department of Water Resources by the July 1st deadline, and then will be filed with the appropriate agencies after that. And with that, I'd like to close and thank you all very much for your attention.
I wanted to make a comment as we thank again Mayor Pro Tem for joining us for the water presentations. That the slide that Philip showed in terms of water demands, it shows that in 2000 we were around 80,000 acre feet per year, and we're projecting out by 2045 about 65-ish thousand acre feet. In previous versions of this plan, previous years, we were looking at 90,000+ acre feet. So our demands have dropped significantly because of all the factors that Philip pointed out. So thank you so much, Philip, for the presentation, and Mr. Chair, members of the board, with regard to the notice of public hearing for this agenda item, the following has occurred. The notice of public hearing was published in a newspaper of general circulation in the city of Anaheim, specifically the Anaheim Bulletin, on May 6, 2021, May 13th, 2021, and the Orange County Register on those same dates. This affidavit of publication of the notice of public hearing concerning this agenda item was filed with the Secretary of the Board. In addition, the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan Amendment were made available for public review by delivering them on May 6, 2021 to the Anaheim Central Public Library and 2 other Anaheim branch libraries, the City Clerk's Office, Anaheim West Tower on the 1st floor, as well as the city's website.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Does any member of the board have any questions? Please remember to direct the questions to me rather than direct to staff. Hearing or seeing no questions, if there's no further questions from the board, then members of the public may make comments in person. Does any member of the public wish to comment on the city's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan Amendment? Please come to the microphone and state your name for the record. The allotted time is 5 minutes per speaker for public hearing items. No public comments. Due to the pandemic, we are also accepting public comments received electronically. Has there been any electronic public comments submitted to the board for consideration?
Mr. Chair, no public hearing comments were received electronically.
Has the secretary of the board received any written correspondence concerning those who received the mail notice regarding the city's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan or the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan Amendment?
Mr. Chair, no written correspondences were received.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, we will now close the public hearing on this matter. This time, I look for a motion from the board that it takes the actions proposed in the staff report dated May 26, 2021, and the attached resolution regarding the adoption.
This is John Seymour. I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Vice Chair Seymour. Second to that motion.
I'll second.
Second made by Member Campos. And you get a roll call.
This is a roll call vote for item number 5. Vice Chair Seymour,
Aye.
Board Member Baroldi,
Aye.
Board Member Bala,
Aye.
Board Member Gaona,
Aye.
Board Member Campos Hertz,
Aye.
Chair Madrano.
Aye.
The vote is 6 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent, not present. Motion carries.
Thank you. Motion passes. Next on to the next item, item number 6. Item number 6, recommending adoption of the Public Utility Department's fiscal year 2021, 2022 proposed.
Okay, and I'll ask Brian Bielner to introduce this item.
Okay, thank you, Duke. Mr. Chair, members of the board. I just want to start off by saying, this fiscal year has been a really challenging year for the agency, and I think just about everyone in here. And putting it together a budget, we had a lot of variables that we had to navigate through, and it hasn't been probably since the Great Recession have we had a year that we faced so many hurdles in our financial planning. If you recall, we were downgraded. Our water agency was downgraded by Fitch. We were put on negative outlook on the electric utility by S&P. We came out of negative outlook by S&P. So it's a lot of peaks and valleys. And I just wanted, before I get started, just thank my budget team, the engineers, the planners, just from top to bottom, the organization putting this budget together. It's a 6-month process. We start in November. It finally goes to a vote by the board in May. So we put a lot of thought into this. And one of the testaments to an agency is low rates and high reliability. And I think this budget accomplishes both of those aims. This keeps our rates low in the lowest portion in the county and keeps the reliability at the highest levels that we can possibly get. So With that, I think we have a couple slides here that I would like to just kind of point out high level. You did have a full presentation last month, so I won't go into a lot of the detail. I just want to point out some highlights of this budget. One thing that we really had a difficult time is trying to determine what is our retail revenue going to be? How much money are we going to have from our customers in order for us to be able to spend that money? You know, we had a dickens of a time trying to gauge when the economy reopened. Our best guess right now in this budget is that everything will be reopened pre-pandemic level by the end of this calendar year. That we'll be back full operations by the end of the calendar year. And that was an estimation that we made in the winter right after the surge. So it looks like we may come out of this maybe earlier than that, and that's our hope. But as any management professor will tell you, hope is not a plan. So we will not hope, we will plan for the end of this calendar year. And if it's better than that, great. If it is that, then we're planning for it. So you can see on the electric retail sales, we do show continued softening in our retail sales as we come out of the pandemic and our commercial industrial sector starts to ramp back up to levels that we typically expect. We do also have, as I mentioned, last month, a bond issuance for electric in this budget, right? Right now, it's a placeholder number of $50 million. It could be more than that if we finance our battery storage project that we have currently planned with bond financing. There may be federal monies available to us in an infrastructure bill that's currently being debated in Congress if that ever passes. So we may have other means of financing the battery storage. That is up in the air. So it could be 50 million is a floor. It could be up to maybe $100 million if we finance the whole battery storage with bond financing. But as you can see, I want to go down to operations. We're flat on our operating costs. We have a 0% increase in our operating costs, and I think that's a testament to just everybody that we work with to do everything they can to keep those costs as low as we can, considering the stresses that our customers are currently under. You know, we currently cannot disconnect customers, so our receivables are higher than we'd like. Our cash flow is under pressure, so everything we can to keep those operating expenses lower. You can also see on the capital expenses, we are forecasting investing more in the system than we budgeted for last year. That includes, like I said, the battery storage project and also groundwater treatment that we're going to be investing in to help alleviate the PFAS problem that we currently find ourselves in. So I think all in all, this is, I think, a pretty prudent, conservative budget. We are proud to propose this budget for adoption by the board. I don't have any other comments other than I just want to thank everyone again for all their work and time they put into this. And I'm open to any questions you have.
Any members of the board have questions of the proposed budget?
I have a question. Will we get the PFAS money back that we're spending now in capital?
Yes, and I defer to Micah. I don't think we've spent anything really yet except for engineering costs. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're talking about so far this year, or you're talking about how's it reflected up here?
How it's reflected up there?
Yes, it's net. We're reflecting net numbers.
That's
So
a net
we
number.
don't actually, in your packet, you probably have the numbers, but on page 34, there's an item called water system reliability, and that's in there. So you can see most of the expenditures start in fiscal 23. So we only really have, I think, some design and engineering costs, and then I think we really start ramping up in the next fiscal year and the year after that.
Yeah.
So you can see the timeline.
So one thing I would like to add is we encumbered the first phase of the project in this current fiscal year. So that monies will carry over into the next. So you don't see it as a proposed item because as the budgeting process in the city is you have to show the entire cost in the year that the project is awarded. So it's about a $70 million investment, which we will get reimbursed for, but the carryover will be reflected in the projected budget next year, not in the proposed, if that makes sense.
Right. The flat operating expenditures is quite a challenge, no doubt. I am very confident that this team will do as good as any team can do. But I was curious as to whether or not the capital expenditure increase will help us in terms of being able to create a flat operating expenditure budget in this year.
It does, and it does so in a couple of ways. One is we do have utility labor inside our capital program. And so the fact that we have projects to reinvest, rehabilitate, replace equipment is reflected as part of the capital budget. So that's one way. The second way, which I think makes a sense to most folks, is that the more you do things like replacing items before they break, it causes less stress on the maintenance side.
Right.
So I think that's one thing that we've been working with. This is, for example, we proposed a transformer replacement program in order to replace more transformers early on, given what we experienced last summer with the heat storm.
Very good. That's what I was hoping to hear.
Yeah, that's an important point. After we experienced the outages, both the macro outages in the western part of the United States and the localized outages due to the heat storms, with everybody turning their air conditioning on at the same time, we have a more robust transformer replacement program built into the budget as well.
Thank you.
Any other members of the board have questions? Mr. Goodman? Seeing or hearing none. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2021-2022 proposed budget.
I move that we approve the budget.
Motion made by member Council Kurtz, and
I will second.
second by Vice Chair Seymour. Get a roll call vote, please.
This is a roll call vote for item number 6. Vice Chair Seymour,
Aye.
Board Member Baroldi,
Aye.
Board Member Bala, Board Member Bala. I see who's motioning yes.
Aye.
Board Member Guyona,
Aye.
Board Member Campos Kurtz,
Aye.
Chair Madrano.
Aye.
The vote is 6 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent, not present. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, we have the approval of amendment to the agreement with United Corporation to upgrade the meter data management system and update software license and maintenance terms. Mr. Lee?
Thank you, and Brian Dillner will present this item as well.
Great, thank you, Duku, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I also have Bruce Fricke here to help answer any specific questions we have on this item. But eMeter provides us a meter data management solution that, Peggy, if you could open up the slide, that is a part of our automated metering infrastructure. And just by way of background, I kind of want to go over where it slots into our customer meter data flow. As you can see, when a customer has a smart meter, that information is fed into what we call our front end or our head end. It's here at City Hall. It then flows into our meter data management system, and it holds all the interval data. All the information that the meter then is sending to us is then sorted into intervals of demand and energy usage, et cetera, for all the different types of customers we have and all the different rates we have. This information then flows into our customer information system, which then determines the bill for the customer, right? How much they owe based on the various incremental charges that we have included in our rates as it applies to each of the usage characteristics of that customer that month, which then flows to the customer either through a paper bill, as you can see in that middle line, or through an electronic bill, which is in the bottom. So it's a fairly complicated process. And this is just one item, the meter data management system, in this flow of information. We first implemented our first meter data management system, I think it was in 2007 as a pilot program for just testing out this technology. It was relatively new, automated metering technology, and we wanted to test it out, and it seemed to be fairly successful. So we then entered into another agreement with eMeter in 2012, and we upgraded our servers and our system. But in that period of time, the meter data management system is now out of date. It needs to be upgraded. It's about to end, eMeter is about to end the support of the current version that we have. So we need to upgrade the system and the servers associated with the system. There's a second amendment to the software license agreement that also allows us to have more meters associated with the software. Right now, I think we're limited to 14,000 or so meters, and this will let us have up to 200,000 meters associated with the system. So it has a lot more capability than we currently have. This is the first amendment, amendment number 4 to the general agreement. It has a not to exceed of $500,000, which will then upgrade the system and provide new servers, which are obviously quite old as they're in terms of pure technology. They were implemented in 2012 and 2013. And then the amendment number 1 to the software license agreement is about $120,000 a year for not to exceed. So with that, Bruce or I are open to any questions, but this is included in our budget. We have the funds available for it, and this will just ensure that we'll continue to be able to bill our customers without interruption, without any issues or delays with this updated software.
Sir, I have a question.
Director Seymour.
I'm just fine with this. It's obvious that this has to be done for sure, but I was curious as to our program or plan to install more meters on the electrical side, and where do we stand on the water side?
Sure. So let me start with the response on that. We've had a long-term program to automate, and where we started was where we have more complicated rates. That happens to be our commercial industrial customers. So all of those meters on the electric side have been transferred to the automated systems because, for example, commercial customers have a demand charge where residents don't. So that's in place. Then over time, we started expanding into residential. So why would we do that for residential? Because we're getting into things like electric vehicle, time of use rates, solar energy customers. And so what we see is things are going to become more complicated with rate options as we progress into the future. So we've been working down this path for a number of years. We're about 50,000 meters out of 120 or so thousand electric meters have been installed. On the water side, we're a little bit further, we're a lot further behind. And the reason why is we're trying to leverage the wireless communication network that we have. So for example, when we first started pilot testing, we had 2 different networks that we were testing out. One of them was 3G. And as we progressed in our testing of it, we got a letter one day saying, we're not going to support 3G by such and such date. And so you need to make some determination. And we felt like, we have this automated radio system for distribution purposes. Why don't we repurpose that for meter reading? And we went with that system. That's what we're using. It's a fixed private network, which does not have the obsolescence issues that we previously experienced. However, they're not as advanced on the water meters. And so Michael has been working with the vendor to try to figure out, hey, can you get us more options? Can you get us more different types of meters that we can test out? So in terms of where we are now, like I mentioned, about halfway roughly with the electric side, we anticipate anywhere from about 4 to 6 years to finish it out completely. Water side might be a little bit longer than that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions from members of the board? Seeing or hearing none. I'll entertain a motion to approve the amendments to the
So moved.
motion made by member Campos Kurtz,
I'll second.
second by Vice Chair Seymour. Roll call vote, please.
This is a roll call vote for item number 7. Vice Chair Seymour,
Aye.
Board Member Baroldi,
Aye.
Board Member Bala,
Aye.
Board Member Guyona has left the meeting. Board Member Campos Kurtz,
Aye.
Chair Madrano.
Aye.
The vote is 5 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent, not present. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, we have update on electric system item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peggy has a slide I'd like to share with the board. Last board meeting, I was expressing our concern with the Mylar balloons outages. We had a number, and I'm happy to report that those have gone down. I'm going to attribute some of that to, or a lot of it, probably to Melissa's group for sending out some public service announcements on how to handle metallic balloons and whatnot, and we've seen a significant drop. So that is very, very positive for us. But one thing I did want to share with the board is an incident that happened at the beginning of the month in May. And this was on a Saturday, May 1st, in the early afternoon, where a large fire started along the railroad tracks that was behind our Lewis substation. And as you can see, the fire progressed further and further. And fortunately, the good news is Anaheim Fire and Rescue was very quick to respond and extinguished fire. But as that fire did progress, our security cameras captured the images and alerted our system operator to it, who was very concerned and called in our substation crews. The reason for the concern is, like fog, dense fog, also smoke, kind of acts like a conductive blanket over electrical equipment. So the denser and denser that smoke gets, there's a higher risk of arcing with electrical equipment. So we kept an eye on this, and as you can see, our substation crews were looking to see how further this goes along. Trying to plan for whether we needed to shift load off of this substation. But it did not get to that point, like I said, fortunately, because fire department was out there. It's responded very quickly. We found out that the source of the large stack was a large stack of railroad ties along the railroad tracks behind there. And we don't know what started the fire, however. But fire department blanketed extinguished the wood with foam, and it was out within an hour. And so that was the good news. There were no issues in our substation. And but what we have done in response to this is we have looked at the perimeters of our other substations to find out if there's any debris or things that could spark a fire of this nature and cause some issues in the near vicinity of our substations. Can you go to the next slide? You can see there where fire department had that pile of wood there, and the vicinity of the back corner of our substation is there. You see another wood pile. So as we were watching this, we thought, oh, well, what are we going to do with that? So we've identified that's our tree trimming crews, our power line tree trimming crews have stored some of their wood trimmings. But in this particular case, at least it is in a secured area that's fenced off, whereas the pile there was by the railroad tracks and open to the public there. So we will work with our utility tree trimming contractor to remove that pile of wood, relocate it, cover it, whatever it needs to be. And then again, as we see any other debris around the perimeters of any of our other substations, we'll find the owners of it and work with them to relocate if it warrants it. So just wanted to share that with the board.
That's good.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. And I don't remember any questions.
Nope.
Hearing none, next item, we have an update on the water system items. Mr. Moore?
Yes, the first thing is our water supply dashboard that you have in front of you and up on the screen. Very similar to last year, as the presentation that we gave shows, the storage levels at the top there are all declining. This is the time of year where usually the snow melts from either our local mountains here or Northern California, Colorado River, and they start increasing. We're still seeing a decline because of very dry conditions, which are indicative of the drought that we're in and that we plan on being in. Go to the next updates, a few updates. So we have, as APU has recognized many homeowners and commercial business owners over the past 6 years that exemplify good landscaping to illustrate water efficient landscaping that we want to promote. And so we hosted again this year the Water Smart Landscape Award here in Anaheim and advertise it throughout social media and through our website for commercial and residential customers. And so we chose one residential and one commercial customer that has redone their landscaping this year and gave them this award for outdoor water use. The first one is, go to the next slide, is the Pizza Hut that's located near Broadway and Magnolia. Here's General Manager Anna Gilbert here in front of that landscaping that you can see. You go to the next slide. You get a better look at it here. And this landscape, the Pizza Hut went through a major renovation this year or last year. And this is one of the few Pizza Huts that offers indoor dining also. And as part of that, they wanted to do something that showed that they're a sustainable company organization through their landscaping here. And so you can see they've installed succulent varieties, dwarf bottle brush, lantana, and African iris have also been put there. But what they also did is they put a dry riverbed along the periphery of this to slow the runoff and collect that water to reuse it. They've also installed a subsurface drip irrigation system. So all these things together, the landscaping, the recapturing the water with that rock and the subsurface drip irrigation, shows exactly what we want to try and promote here with our commercial customers. This property, if they would have put grass in this same area, turf, versus this landscaping system that they've done has saved over 150,000 gallons per year of water just for this one facility. And then for the residential, you see here our customer, Joseph Garcia, here, Orange and Euclid, his front yard that he did. That looks really nice. And he did this all himself, came up with the design, laid it out, took some of the courses that we offer on drought tolerant landscaping. He's put in a dwarf bottle brush, lantana, kangaroo paw, native grasses, and decomposed granite to create the permeable surface to capture the water better. And it looks great. He's got a lot of color in there. They've grown up. You can see the award sign we have there. You go to the next slide. Yeah. And if he would have put turf in here, grass in here instead of this, it would have used over 160,000 gallons per year more water. And so that's what he's saving with his contribution with his landscaping there. So we recognize both these customers and we're really happy to show their great landscape designs that they have. Also, we want to update you. So our phase A of our groundwater treatment plant program that you guys recommended to City Council for award a couple months ago, we had our kickoff meeting right here in this room last Thursday. So we had representatives from our consultants that are helping us manage the project, as well as the design builder that is CDM, both met here to kick the project off and start this important 2-year project. So we're really happy to do that. Just want to let you know that that project, that phase A, is moving forward, and we're already getting ready to solicit for a design builder for the phase B. These two projects will be running in parallel to each other soon. Next slide. Then the day before that, last Wednesday, we recognized our water poster contest winners, these children, and our water bottle art contest winners. This year, this theme, we do this every year for May, which is Water Awareness Month. And the theme this year was Water is Life, and we had 75 entries from 8 schools, and we selected 16 kids for the poster contest, and 2 that their art will be displayed on our water bottles that we have each year. So we change each year. So the really great ceremony. The Ducks were a great partner that we had, that we partnered with. So they got a tour of the locker rooms, they got a tour of the entire ice rink, and the kids had a really good time. Thanks to Wild Wing, not thanks to me. They were very entertaining. And that is it. That's all my updates.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to an update on finance and energy resource items.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We'll go over the finance dashboard first. So as you can see, and it's in your packet too, if that's too small, the electric utility is continuing to suffer some softening revenue. As you can see in April, about $1.4 million shy of our budget on revenue. However, we were also $1.4 million lower on our budget expenditure. So April, all in all, you were essentially break even. So you can see on the aggregate numbers for the year, even though our revenue numbers are down, we're able to save, a good amount of money on power supply and other costs that we've been able to avoid. On the water system, the next slide or the next page, you had a little uptick in revenue in April, which was a nice reversal of fortunes. So you can see in April, we were about $1 million above budget. So brings us to about $3 million or 3.7% below budget on water, with a corresponding $3 million below budget on our costs. So we're treading, if you will, pardon the pun, on water. So I think all in all, considering everything that's been going on, it's been a pretty successful year so far financially. On the power supply dashboard, we had a couple outages that were unplanned in April. Our Magnolia Power Plant had an extended planned outage that then turned into an unplanned outage through the end of April due to various trips and testing issues. There was testing equipment that had to be removed. So they finally got it back up online April 30th, and then to find we had also IPP was down for a period of time in April. So you can see on the chart there on our retail portfolio mix, we had a large amount of purchases in April. We had to replace that power. The good news on that though is power is really cheap in April. In fact, there are periods of time when the price is negative. So people actually paid us to take power from them due to sunny days, but not hot days. There's a lot of solar production. Tends to be more hydro production than normal during April because of melting snowpack, et cetera. So there's an excess supply of power in the marketplace that we're able to take advantage of. So even though we had those unplanned outages of our legacy plants, it didn't impact our budget all that much because power prices were lower than we would typically see. The last thing I do want to mention is I don't think it will impact the utility, but the general fund recently was downgraded again by Standard & Poor's to A- with a negative outlook. Negative outlook would bring them to BBB territory, which is less than investment grade. So the rating agencies continue to look negatively upon Anaheim as we continue to struggle through the pandemic and get visitors back, get conventions back, get sporting events back. So we haven't gotten any guidance from them that anything similar will occur to the utility, but I do have frequent continued conversations with them. Standard & Poor's, who downgraded the general fund, took us off negative outlook, the electric utility off negative outlook. So that's a good sign for us. But if variants show up that are vaccine resistant or something happens to the pandemic, all bets are off. So again, we're treading carefully, but the general fund is still, I think the rating agencies are still concerned about what's happening with the transit occupancy tax and the lack of visitors here. Hopefully with the June 15th date of things opening up, real numbers will start to show the rating agencies that visitors are coming, things are open, removal of mask mandates, et cetera, will hopefully get the general fund back into a more normal rating. With Fitch's ratings, we are tied to the general fund. So if Fitch downgrades the general fund again, our water utility will drop we're tethered. We cannot be more than 3 notches above the general fund just by their own methodology. So if Fitch takes an action, our water utility will just drop just by the nature of their methodology, not because of anything that is problematic or any kind of systemic risk associated with the water agency. So that's the potential impact to us.
I will say that there are some reports now that hotels are nearing 70% occupancy levels, which is really, really, really good news to hear for the city, certainly for the utility, and as they open up to outside of California residents, and who knows beyond that, hopefully we see stronger recovery numbers throughout the year.
Questions, members of the board? Seeing here none. Update on administration and risk service.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good evening, board members. I have several updates this evening. Included in your package is the first quarter of the internal compliance plan. It covers January, February, and March. The report provides a summary of some of the key efforts that go on to maintain compliance. I'd like to highlight that there was an exceedance of the PM10. That's a particulate matter 10 at the Canyon Power Plant that was discovered during testing, and a notice of violation was issued in January. We feel like these particles are related to ash that was going on during the wildfires in November. And so we're working with the AQMD to try to negotiate this violation. Overall, the compliance for the period went quite well due to the efforts of staff. On the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs dashboard, we're highlighting, or I should say, last week, it's kind of nice, and board member Norma Campos, you're probably aware of this, that the Assembly and the Senate limited the bills to 12 bills per Assembly. So a number of our Assembly and Senate, so a number of our bills have become 2-year bills. That's really kind of lightened our workload a bit. So I've highlighted 4 bills on the dashboard. 2 of them, the water-related bills we talked about last time. The other 2 are related to climate resiliency bonds. And those will be opportunities for the utility to potentially be able to get some funding for some of our infrastructure projects, potentially recycled water, maybe the energy storage. So we're looking at that very closely. On the safety part of it, our safety statistics, again, with the exception of COVID and shoulder injury, are very similar to last year. So we're trending very well on that. And in closing, I want to share with you on some of our ongoing efforts on customer service. So customers are becoming increasingly more comfortable with online services and expect them. So we're initiating a campaign to increase awareness of the services that we currently already offer online, including we're also offering a new incentive to sign up for outages, as this is one of the events that kind of trigger our call volumes. So we're trying to minimize that. And we expect over the next few months, as the state opens up, the customers are likely to have many questions regarding their accounts. And so we'd like to help them be aware of all of the self-service options so that they can get information quickly and efficiently and not have to wait on the phone. The services include bill payment and online balance checking. And we're also exploring additional services like customer turn-on, payment extensions on the IVR, as well as fraud reporting to try to help the services we offer. And then in closing, I'd like to thank you, Chairman Medrano, for your service on the Legislative Working Group. Your representation to the customers has helped shape our representation in Sacramento and with the federal at the federal level as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Any members of the board have any questions? Hearing none, I'm by secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have some items for next month. We will have the election for a replacement chairperson and vice chair. So usually we do it in July, but given the circumstances with Chair Medrano's departure, we're going to be accelerating that. In addition, we were planning to do a summer readiness presentation this month. However, we had an exercise. And in addition, we're still getting information from what's going on throughout the state. And so to have a more fuller explanation of how we're preparing for this summer, we've pushed it out for 1 month. We also have a substation physical security presentation that we'll be making to the board, something that the Public Utilities Commission, who doesn't govern us, has jurisdiction over some safety protocols, and so they are requiring a physical security plan that we will be submitting. And then we have our update to the 5-year undergrounding program. And we also have master agreements for pre-qualified electrical contractors. So that's planned for next month. The next thing I'd like to announce is we were able to conduct interviews for high school students who participated in our scholarship program. And our subcommittee, who are made up of Vincent Beraldi, Norma Campos Kurtz, and Rudy Gaona, were really engaging, interacted with the students, and they ended up selecting not 1, not 2, but actually 3 winners. And so the first place winner is Brooke Wynn from Canyon High. The second place winner is Kaylee Barkley from Esperanza. And the third place is Laura Pham from Oxford Academy. And I think, as I participated in it myself, I was very, very impressed with all of the students and pleased that this was the outcome that we arrived at. So we'll talk a little bit more about it next month, and we've invited the students to come in. So hopefully we could do a check presentation at the next meeting. I do have a few slides I wanted to show. Unfortunately, Mayor Pro Tem had to depart, but wanted to recognize his participation with receiving test equipment from the family of George Elkers. So George Elkers was a previous superintendent of the utility, and essentially the superintendent was the general manager. So he was my predecessor, and this is his son, George Jr., and his wife. And there's a piece of test equipment that the Mayor Pro Tem is holding. If you could go to the next slide. So not only did George Jr. come, he brought his entire family. And so his children and his children's children were there to just recognize that the contributions that Mr. Elkers made. There's actually a circuit, high voltage circuit named Elkers after him. And this was a way for us to be able to take some of these old analog devices, and we're looking for a way to be able to present them. So we're in discussions right now with the Museo to maybe have a display for some of these old items, nostalgic items from the past. So our thanks to Mayor Pro Tem and the Elkers family for their donation of this vintage test equipment. And the last thing that I have is just a sad one for me. We lost a big part of our Anaheim Public Utilities family, and that's Mr. John Macchiaverna. He was our board chair for a number of years. The thing that really kind of stood out to me with John was he was big. He was larger than life. You know, he had a big laugh. He had a big heart. You know, he thought big. He wanted to help the community in so many different ways. And so when he transitioned from a board member here and then became the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club, it made all the sense in the world. And he lost a fight with cancer, and we're so sad to see him depart. But we were blessed to have him a part of our board and a part of our utility for a number of years. And we will honor and recognize him if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair. And just wanted to remind the board that his memorial service is open to the public. It will be on June 1st, which is a Tuesday. It will be held at Pearson Park at 10 a.m. So just across the street from here. And we anticipate that there will be a fairly large group of people when you consider the number of lives that he's touched over the years. So I'd really respectfully request that we close the meeting in his honor.
With that item, my members of the board, member Burrows, any items?
No, just a couple things. One, being part of that interview process was really great to see how many wonderful kids are in the city of Anaheim that have such great resumes, even at the age of 18. It was a difficult decision. They were all amazing candidates. And then those photos you shared, Duku, of the analog equipment, it's funny, in 100 years, kids will be looking at cell phones the same way as we look at that.
Great point.
Thank you. Member Bala?
No.
Items? Thank you. Member Campos Kurtz?
I do want to say thank you for allowing me to be part of the committee that interviewed the students. They were phenomenal, and it was heartwarming to hear their stories. It is amazing to hear their leadership, their involvement in the community and in their schools. And hopefully we did you proud in picking those 3 young women. That's it. Thank you. Oh, no, last thing. Thank you to Chair Medrano for helping me just get accustomed to the board. And it's only been 3 months, but thank you for serving with you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Seymour.
I too would like to thank Ernesto. He's done a wonderful job as being our chair. He runs a solid meeting. He's always on time. I'm gonna miss you. And have a good time in Laguna de Gal.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And again, you heard my earlier, so,
Mr. Gaona, I think.
is Mr. Gowan on?
Oh, did he leave
I
already?
heard he left.
Okay, you're right.
So I won't belabor it. I'm gonna miss each and every one of you. I do intend to come back and visit, because I've been doing a lot of work up here in Anaheim. So anyway, so.
You have to come during the public
I will
comment
not.
section.
Speaker of public comments. But I enjoy each and every one of you. Thank you. So without any further ado, I would like to. Legal name is Johnny Mann. I had the privilege to serve on the board. He was chair. In fact, they sat right next to him. And just a wonderful, magnificent human being. There's no question about that. He made choices, dedicated life to community service of the children, young men and women. And he worked very hard at that. So it's very sad and very, to me, it just moving to see that passed on. So with that said, I'd like to call for a moment of silence. As I said, I mean, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Vice Chair Seymour. Seconded by Member Campos Hertz. Roll call.
This is a roll call vote for item number 14. Vice Chair Seymour,
Aye.
Board Member Baraldi,
Aye.
Board Member Bala,
Aye.
Board Member Campos Kurtz,
Aye.
Chair Madrano.
Aye.
The vote is 5 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent, not present.